ボスラッシュポッドキャスト。
Howdy, howdy. How's everything going today? Welcome to Bosurasshu podcast. I am your host, Moonlit Kaiser. I will not be joined by anyone today. Welcome to the Bosurasshu podcast, episode 2. Today we're going to have a short podcast. Wanted to go over a few things with today. The Super Mario Bros. Movie that recently came out. My wife and I and a couple of friends went out to go see it. Gotta say, fantastic movie. Highly recommend it. The movie itself, at an hour and 30, I believe it was, this movie was actually pretty dang good. The visuals were stunning. People who come off the game as fans, even with the smallest details, could pick up on a lot of references and Easter eggs, which is always real fun to see. One of my weird favorites is Comic, the Magic Koopa. You can see it in the poster, the little comic with the wand. He is one-to-one how he should be. Even when he would teleport, it would make that noise. And it just brought so many memories back from Super Mario World 2 Yoshi. And just in general, even all the Magic Koopas that are throughout the games. I think he was Super Mario World, the first Super Mario World. It's fun. It's so fun to see all these things. So many callbacks to different Mario games. Lots of Mario Galaxy references. Super Mario World 2 Yoshi with Mario and Luigi being babies. That's kind of cute. I love that. Donkey Kong with DK Rap. There's just so much. This movie has so much to give for an hour and 30, and they nailed it. The weirdest thing I've ever seen is them nailing something like this in an hour and 30. It's real hard. It's super risky, but it gets straight to the point. Doesn't feel rushed or hyper cliched. I was a little worried at first that it was going to be super woke because I heard that Anya Taylor-Joy, the voice actress for Peach, was going to make it different for modern audiences. So Peach is more of a girl boss in this one. She doesn't necessarily need Mario. She just have a moment where having Mario there is beneficial, but more or less can handle stuff on her own, which I get. It's cool. I was just worried hearing that it was going to go down kind of a woke ideology, but it honestly didn't. I think it fit kind of well. So Luigi is essentially the trope in this movie, and he gets captured by Bowser. He just had unfortunate events, and he landed in Bowser's territory. So it's more or less Peach, Toad, Mario, and DK trying to rescue Luigi and stop Bowser from taking over the Super Mario world. I don't know what the actual world is called itself. because you've got DK Isles or Kong Isles, Mushroom Kingdom, the Penguin Frozen Kingdom. They didn't exactly establish a name for the world, which is kind of a bummer. But for the most part, I'll just probably be referring to it as Super Mario World. The Rainbow Road was actually pretty interesting. I think everybody was super excited to see how Rainbow Road would work in this movie. I think it worked out pretty well. It's kind of sad that there could have been a longer scene for Rainbow Road. I think it was a little short, like just a tad, but the action was amazing. The Mario Kart Easter eggs are great. Everything from like the ready set go sound effect to Mario on the cart drifting. Like the sound effects, the colors, the boost. It's one for one pretty loyal to the source material. Illumination knocked it out of the park. I was a little worried at first. Like I'm a huge fan of Universal, and when it comes down to DreamWorks and Illumination, DreamWorks is my go-to. But I still like Illumination. There are some things with Illumination that I can understand people are upset about. Minions is caked on, but you gotta admit though, it still is entertaining to go watch Despicable Me and Minions. Yes, it does fall off. Like Despicable Me 3 was definitely the weakest out of the trilogy. Minions is weird. Minions is kind of back and forward. First Minions was amazing. Rise of Gru is like really good movie. Like it's way up there. I think it's one of my favorites compared to all of the Minions and Despicable Me. Rise of Gru is definitely one of my favorite movies from Elimination. And I can see the why it did so well and there was so much hype around it. It did good. It was just shy of $1 billion. And obviously Mario's gonna make it. Did y'all hear? This movie has only been out for what, 3 days now? And it's already at 400 million. It's this is clearly gonna hit $1 billion. So the marketing is genius behind this. The movie came out on Easter weekend. Cool. But what a lot of people don't understand is that this movie is also coming out on Golden Week in Japan. Golden Week is essentially the spring break for Japan, where they get a week off, they're able to enjoy, unwind, kind of let loose for a bit. So you have to think, this is a Japanese IP. The Japanese are getting this and will have a whole week to enjoy this. This is massive for overseas sales. Mario is clearly going to shatter $1 billion, and apparently it passed up Frozen, or Frozen 2, sorry, as the fastest grossing movie on opening. Frozen 2 was huge, but Mario just completely shattered this within, I think it was like the second day. That is like absolutely crazy how fast it got that much money. Mario movie isn't a bad movie. It isn't an amazing movie. It's a just shy of an amazing movie. I would say it's fun. It's fun. It's great. If you're a fan of Nintendo, it's perfect, flawless. I've had so many of my coworkers and so many people in passing all tell me that you'll get teary eyed. Honestly, this movie did hit some good nostalgia feelings and got my wife and I and even my friend MTZ got us all tearing up because we went through a lot. Like no one would have expected that video game movies would be here today. Like Sonic was possibly the weirdest thing I thought I would ever see because growing up I was somewhat privileged and was able to have multiple game systems in the 90s, which was kind of unheard of. So I ended up having a NES and a Sega Master System growing up, and which was really weird because I leaned more towards the Master System over the NES, which is kind of unheard of. People didn't even know what the heck a Master System was at the time, but I absolutely loved it. Hey, what's going on, MTZ? How you doing, man? Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I know MTZ's in the chat right now, and I guarantee you, MTZ felt the same way when we ended up watching the movie. Absolutely gorgeous, like just 100% visually stunning. I think back on the subject where we were growing up and modern media outlets such as like local news and Good Morning America and all these other different places would sit there and say video games are bad for you, they rot the brain, uh, don't ever bother having your kids play these games, it's just bad for them. Sounds good, MT. I'm glad you popped in, man. Good luck at work. Yes, sir. I'll be uploading this to YouTube, so you can catch all streams will be uploaded to Moonlit Kaiser's YouTube under the Bosurasshu podcast, and they'll be labeled by episodes. So yeah, make sure to stop by and check it out. Back on subject. So yeah, all these news outlets would just sit there and say that all the video games are bad for you. Don't ever let your kids watch or play these games. It's not good for them at all. And it really picked up with games like Mortal Kombat. When Mortal Kombat started to hit the eyes through like Hollywood Video and Blockbuster, people blew a head gasket. People were freaking out like, "Oh, this is it. This is the way to indoctrinate kids into becoming, you know, terrible people." And we slowly ended up having movies throughout the years. A lot of them were hit and miss. Like the Mortal Kombat movie is hit or miss. It's more like an average movie where it was a great movie, but it wasn't amazing. It had a lot of terrible parts in it. The story was semi inconsistent, so it didn't make a lot of sense. The the '90s Mario movie was not great. They wanted to adapt it and put a Hollywood spin on it, and was not faithful to the source material at all. Yoshi was an abomination. Bowser looked terrifying. The Goombas were arguably the worst character designs in that whole movie. But we didn't really have a choice. Growing up, that was kind of like the only thing we could probably ever get. So we didn't really complain about it. We fast forward today. I've had Genesis, Sega CD, Super Nintendo, N64, GameCube, yada yada yada. And I still was hardcore into Sega. I've always been a Sega guy. And when I met my wife in 2006, she didn't have the luxury of owning any of these consoles. She even had a really cool story where when I started dating her, she didn't even have a PlayStation 2. But for her birthday, she really wanted a Final Fantasy game. And she got Final Fantasy X, brand new, when it first released for her birthday. Granted, she didn't have a system to play it on, but she knew one day just holding on to that she would be able to play it hopefully one day in the future when she could ever get some money for it. I thought that was a pretty amazing thing. It just goes to show you how much passion people can have for gaming. And when I started dating her in 2006, it wasn't until I started going over to her house and saw that she didn't really have anything. She had a PlayStation 1, but of course, with the PlayStation 2, I always asked, I was like, you have Final Fantasy X on PlayStation 2. Why haven't you played it? And she would tell me, I don't actually have the system, which I surprised her. And ended up going to bring my PlayStation 2 over, and then eventually further down the road she got her own PlayStation 2, and she finally got to play it. And for me to actually see her play that, like, I mean, this was like one of the most impactful things I could ever see. Like, introducing somebody to the world of gaming isn't just an experience. It's like a wonderful feeling. You're impacting this person that could end up changing the way they look at things in the world. I've had several friends where they were kind of sport lover rather than game lover. And this one particular friend, I would call him Mr. M, he never played any video games in his life. I would work with him. And when I found out that he wanted to play the PlayStation 3 Soul Calibur 4 game because Darth Vader and Yoda were in it, I told him, I was like, do you have any systems? And he said no. I told him, I was like, it's okay. Here's my copy of Soul Calibur 4. I didn't need it anymore. It was pretty dated. I was in a tournament scene for a while and kind of fell off because the tournament scene dies down. So I didn't necessarily need the game anymore. So I go ahead and I give it to him. He had the extra cash to go out and buy a second-hand PlayStation 3 just to play it. And comes back to me maybe like a week after and tells me, yo, I'm hardcore addicted to this game. And told him, I was like, this is technically your first game, isn't it? He tells me, yeah, this is my first game. I can see why people can really get invested into this. And then shortly after, we go years down the road, and he's Mr. M is playing all sorts of different genres of games. He's like hardcore super fan for the Souls series that will fight you on saying that Bloodborne is the greatest Souls game of all time, which I can agree with. But just to go from a person who would get his entertainment from sports, like watching on TV and stuff, not necessarily playing it, but just watching it on TV, to just a simple gesture of passing down a game to someone, them playing it, and instantly getting hooked on it. I want people to take a time out of their busy life and schedule to, if you see a friend that doesn't have the luxury or doesn't have the proper interest in video games, give them a donation. Give them a game. Give them an old system. Let them enjoy this. You only live once. And to miss out on gaming with stories, voice acting, music, gameplay, character building, world building, these are novels visualized. Do them a favor and let them experience that. Don't let your friends miss out on something as great as this, because then they'll start having appreciation for where we came from growing up to now, where we can have a Super Mario Bros. Movie in theaters by a major production group, and they're able to catch these references and enjoy. Yeah, that's my thoughts on the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and especially with how far we've come in video games and pop culture, mainstream media. Hopefully it'll just keep going up from here. Now, as great as Mario is, I would rate it as a 8 out of 10. I almost want to say 9. The only reason I wouldn't give it a 9 is the runtime. I get it. People need to understand that all family-friendly movies. I don't like saying kid movies because, these are aimed towards the younger audience, but everyone of all ages can enjoy these movies, regardless. So I would say family friendly movie. If it was a little longer, it would be a 9. But just the sheer fact that it's an hour and 30, I have to give it to the 8. An 8 out of 10. Now we'll move along. The second thing I wanted to talk about, which I'm hardcore excited about, is the Evil Dead Rises movie. So MTZ and I are huge Evil Dead fans. And by huge, I mean every movie night, we almost always debate on watching Evil Dead 2. And even the Evil Dead remake. Just because they're that good. We're that big on the Evil Dead series. I have an Evil Dead 2 board game by Jalisco Games. And granted, it's not the greatest game, but for Evil Dead fans, it's amazing. Being able to control some of the survivors throughout the story, and even controlling Ash, to stuff as the deer head and the haunted trees coming after you, it's pretty dope. It's a really good game. We haven't actually seen the Evil Dead TV series. Haven't actually heard much about it. I remember it blew up for a while, and then it kind of died down. I would say the last thing that I personally had with the Evil Dead franchise was when they introduced Ash to Dead by Daylight. They even include the puppet. And the puppets think it's a huge thing in the Evil Dead TV show. So I'm glad that they gave some love to the source material. Evil Dead Rises, I'm not trying to look anywhere in depth into what the story is or anything. I'll watch the trailer, and that's it. MT and I have both agreed that we are going to go into this completely blind, and we're going to see how it goes. I don't know if it is a continuation. I don't know if this is going to be a prologue of sorts because it is Evil Dead Rise. But I told him my thought is this might take up after Army of Darkness, and that they end up coming back. It shows, I guess, their mother is possessed this time. So I'm not sure what is really going on in the story. This movie was supposed to come out, like a year ago, but due to complications, they had to push it back. And was honestly really excited for this movie because my wife and I just got back in October of last year from Universal's HHN, which is their haunted house month. And Evil Dead Rises was supposed to be a haunted house, but got canceled. And I think replaced with something called Hill Block Horror, which I actually liked Hill Block Horror. I think Hill Block Horror was cool, which I can see if that was the one that was supposed to be Evil Dead for the haunted house. It has some aesthetics that reminds me of Evil Dead. So, Evil Dead Rise is definitely our next big movie we're going to end up watching. Super, super enjoyed it. I'll end up having MTZ on one day, and we'll talk about his thoughts on the Mario movie and the Evil Dead Rise movie, because by then, either we would have seen it, because it is like April 10th right now, or if he gets on a little earlier, we could just talk about his anticipation for the movie. So he's seen the trailer. He agrees with me. This looks pretty well thought out and designed. It's got the really good chill factor too, especially when she peeks through the door and it's like the one-way peephole, but she could still see one of the kids through the peephole. So it just goes to show you how powerful this possession is. So I'm super excited about it. We did watch Dungeons and Dragons movie. We'll end up doing a small review another day about it. But just to give you a a short summary, it was great. It got dethroned pretty fast by John Wick and the Mario Bros. Movie, which everybody knew Mario Bros. Movie was gonna take down John Wick and D&D. But all three of those movies were good. John Wick, D&D, and then Mario Bros. Movie that came after. All of three of them back to back were just absolutely amazing movies. So if we can go for four with Evil Dead, that'd be awesome. This year is turning out for an amazing movie for movies. Or an amazing year for movies, sorry. So Evil Dead is something I'm looking forward to. I think it's going to be massive. So just to talk about what's coming up. Possibly not today after the stream. I'm probably going to do it maybe tomorrow once I get off of work. I'll probably do an episode 3 podcast. And we'll do some more talking on the podcast, reviews, upcoming pop culture events and stuff. But on my gaming side, we're going to be playing some more Fear. And I'm honestly excited to get some more gameplay done because I think Fear is actually a really cool game. If anybody's caught me playing Fear originally, I did mention that my first experience with this game, I played, it was like a rental copy from Hollywood Video. Never finished it. Didn't even play the second or the third one. But I heard great things about Fear. And I heard some mixed things about Fear as well. I heard the storyline was great. Gameplay was revolutionary. Fear 1 is an old game, but it had corner peeking for an FPS, which is huge. Which at the time, a lot of games didn't do corner peeking, but this definitely gave it the tactical feel. I think corner peeking should always be in FPSs. It's always just a cool thing to have. At least tactical FPSs. If it's like full on like Call of Duty, scoop your brains out and just run across the map and just start, blaring your guns. Clearly, you don't need a tactical peek. But for the people who haven't actually seen what Fear is essentially these group of mobile task force members that have to go in and find out what happened to, I guess, other members. Or they were actually trying to hunt someone down. I can't quite remember. I did play only like 15 minutes of the game so far. But I know the story centers around this girl, which she has psychokinetic or telekinetic powers and can rip these guys to shred and induce all sorts of levels of fear in them. And as the games progress from like the second game and the third game, in the second game she's just a lot older. And then in the third game she's actually a mother and she has a kid, which is terrifying because I guess that kid ends up, becoming just like her. So for the most part it's a trilogy from what I understand. But Fear was great. Just playing it just for a little bit. Obviously the graphics didn't age well, but pushing that aside, gameplay is astounding. The sound's astounding. I'm playing it on like a Logitech headset, so I mean, it has a pseudo surround sound feel to it, which is pretty good for a game of this age. So I recommend anybody going back to play Fear. They're relatively cheap on PC. I'm sure you can pick this up in bargain bins for like older consoles anywhere, like at your local game shops. So we'll end up going back and we're playing Fear. Other games I wish to go back and finish on the gaming podcast would be Sin and Punishment. I played a little bit of Sin and Punishment and whew, man, I got torn up. Sin and Punishment is a hard game. I even played a little bit off stream, but I've got to say though, as hard as Sin and Punishment is for the Nintendo 64, it's fun. It's a really really cool game. My my only thing is that it's railgunny and runs off of like an arcade, like uh like an arcade credit system. So it's one of those things where you're like, oh hey, you end up dying, and they tell you insert coins or credits to continue, which kind of helps you lose the immersion, which is unfortunate because going into this, I was surprised that their kind of like demo movie that would play before you push start had a lot of story and lore into it. I still don't necessarily understand what Sin and Punishment is yet until I guess I get further, because technically I guess I was in what, like the third area, the third stage, and unfortunately I have to go back and I have to play it all over. But I guess there is three different groups. We're playing the main characters that are kind of like the group to stop these weird aliens and this other group from, I guess, weaponizing them. Then there is the villains of the game, which they're either trying to weaponize the aliens or do something. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure. And then of course there's like these weird mutant alien things. But that's pretty much all I got for it from now. I haven't gotten too far into it. I may actually have to do some more research into it because it's very vague with the story at first. I can see why it didn't come over to the West, because this is a I don't want to even say like just Japanese or just, Asian Pacific areas, because I think it did come to Europe, but I'm not sure. But they just released this on the Switch if you've got that little pass that lets you access the retro games. So Sin and Punishment is one of the games they try to entice people to try because it's on there. And I think people are slowly starting to open up about Sin and Punishment being one of those games they've never heard of, never tried. It's good. I recommend it. It's a bit difficult, especially with so much going on, because it's not necessarily a hell shooter, which hell shooters are the games you see where like there's like a bazillion bullets on the screen at once. It's on a linear railgun kind of like style where you clear waves and then it transitions over to the next scene and then you clear those enemies and then the next scene. So like I said, that's where the arcade feeling comes in, which isn't a bad thing. It's just for something like this, you wouldn't expect it to feel like that. It's like me. I'm a huge Gradius fan and like R-Type and everything, and it just that feels like it's just this was an arcade game and they threw it on the consoles to be like, here you go, we can make some more money if we do it this way. I have to look into it. I wouldn't doubt if this was an arcade game and then they just moved it over to consoles to get some extra cash off of it. But yeah, so that pretty much covers episode 2 of the podcast. So what we're gonna end up doing is possibly tomorrow I'll end up coming back and we'll do episode 3 of the podcast. See if I could get a guest like MTZ on, and we could talk about movies, upcoming video games, movie ratings, game ratings. He has quite a bit of material that I could discuss with him about. I had some good ideas that some of my friends and even one fan messaged me about, saying that we could do tier lists, like video game tier lists, movie tier lists, character tier list, romantic crush tier list. That'll be juicy. But yeah, that's always some things to look forward into. And until next time, thank you for coming to the Bosurasshu podcast, episode 2. We will see you when we see you. Y'all have a wonderful weekend.